Well, good morning, Faircreek. As Greg said, my name is John, and I'm excited to be your stand-in bald guy for the morning. Today, I really am excited, though, to be wrapping up this series with you guys called Crazy Things That I Heard at Church. And I've been talking with Greg about this, over the course and kind of watching in from home on my own. And I like this because Greg has been talking about these crazy things that you may have at some point heard, like at a church or from Christians or something, that may have caused you at some point to maybe lose your faith. Maybe it was a faith of your childhood, a faith that was taught to you by your parents, something that you grew up with, something that was just around all of your life, but it caused you, something that you heard, something you experienced caused you to lose your faith. Maybe it was a fledgling faith, something that you kind of came to on your own in your teenage years or maybe in your young adult years, like your early adult years, and that like thing that came along, you heard something, you experienced something, but it made you lose your faith in God. Maybe it made you lose your faith in the church. Maybe something crazy that you heard caused you to refuse faith. Maybe that's more of your story, that you heard something, you experienced something, and you looked and your thought was, if that's what faith in God is, or if that's what God requires, I'm good. I don't need that. I'm good without it. But possibly in your life, something crazy you heard or something that you experienced caused you to choose the faith for yourself. You were searching, something was going on in your life, and you heard something that was just so crazy, it was so different that it made you lean in, and it ultimately made you lean in to faith. And I know our hope, and I know as I talked with Greg about this and some of the staff, our hope would be that that is what has happened with you or is happening with you in your life right now. Because here's what I know. In the midst of these crazy things, like we've been highlighting different stuff that can actually help grow your faith. We've been highlighting things like practical teaching. And I'd encourage you, if you haven't seen this, if this is your first time here today, or if this is your first time watching online, I'd encourage you, go back and look at these things. Because we've been talking about things like practical teaching, right? And the biggest thing here is practical. Like having a purpose for it. It meaning something for Monday. That's important. The other thing is, if you don't put an application to what you were doing, like it's just information. And I think we all could get on the same page here. I think we would all agree that information doesn't create transformation. In fact, I would argue with you that having all of the information can stop you from growing or stop you from transforming, because we can all come to a place in our life that we believe that we just know it all. And then we just settle and we stay where we're at. Greg talked about finding purpose in life and beginning to serve, because personal ministry reminds us that we have a role to play in other people's lives. And so Greg encouraged you, if you are serving, to up your serving, to take it to that next level. And if you're not, to jump in, because you have a specific purpose in life that God wants to use you for. And so to be a part of that. Greg encouraged you guys to build good relationships. And we all want to have good relationships in life, but what are we willing to do to get those good relationships? And he talked about the providential kind, the kind of relationships that are there through the good and the bad to tell us what we need to know, not what we want to know or what we want to hear. And then last week, Greg did that triple dog dare challenge with you guys about building like these private disciplines, healthy routines into our lives. And it's important because God wants to spend time with us. And I think that gets lost in the midst of all this. God wants to spend time with us. And so Greg encouraged you guys to start like a reading plan, to invest in it in 30 days, to invest in being like a person who intentionally gives for 30 days and to give God a chance to use that to grow your faith. And listen, all of those things that he's been talking about, they're all pretty simple. They're all pretty straightforward. And for the most part, they're positive. But you need to know before we go anywhere else today that today isn't that. Today is possibly like the craziest one of all of these things that has been talked about, which of course he splits out and lets me do this one, right? Today is about the times in life when things don't go according to our plan. When the wheels fall off, when the poo hits the proverbial fan, if you pick up what I'm laying down for you. And I think we can all agree that life is full of surprises. I mean, especially just 1 year away from the world completely shutting down due to a global pandemic. We can all get on the same page with that life is full of surprises, right? And I don't know about you, but the crazy thing that I heard growing up is that everything happens for a reason. Now, to be completely transparent with you, this wasn't crazy for me personally when I was growing up. In fact, it was really easy for me to ignore this as a child growing up because nothing ever really happened in my life. I seriously grew up with the most vanilla life that you can imagine. I was an only child, so I got all of my parents' attention. There was no siblings that I was fighting with it for. There was no sibling that was doing something dumb that didn't just created life problems. I don't have any of that in my life. My dad was a pastor, and he wasn't the kind of pastor that would say one thing and then live another way. My dad just turned 78 on Friday, and to this day, he lives out the things that he says in his life. It was a great example for me. We weren't what people would have considered wealthy, but we had everything we needed and then some in our lives. And so looking back, I realized just how wealthy that we were. But guys, there were no major occurrences in my life. There were no surprise deaths. There were no divorces, in or around me that affected anything, or really any kind of trouble at all, any kind of trouble that I can remember. But for some people, and maybe for some of you who are sitting here today, the thought that everything happens for a reason, this thought here, or that, to state it another way, that God has a purpose in our pain, that can be a hard pill for some of you to swallow. And for some of you guys, you're sitting here, this has been your life. It's been one unexpected event after another. And it's crazy and it's possibly even offensive that someone, especially someone with such a vanilla life that I've had, would try to tell you that everything you've gone through, that it all has a purpose, and that it happened or that it is happening or that it will happen in the future for a reason. But I'm going to ask you, if that's you this morning as you're listening, I'm going to ask you to take that idea, to take that cynicism, to take that skepticism that you may have, and I'm going to ask you to take it, and I'm going to ask you to set it over here for just the next few moments, and to consider with me that this just might be true. Because I believe that every unexpected event brings with it unimaginable opportunity. Every unexpected event that comes our way, everything that happens brings unimaginable opportunity. Maybe it's just an opportunity to learn things about ourselves and about the people who are around us. We did that through the pandemic, right? We learned a lot about ourselves. We learned a lot about the people that are around us. An opportunity for us to grow emotionally and to see how we handle these situations, to pay attention to those things. An unimaginable opportunity for us to grow personally. Opportunities for relationships in our lives to start, right? And when you go through something with somebody, you can start a really great relationship, or a relationship that you have. If you go through something with them, you can grow like a deeper relationship with someone. Opportunities to see God and his heart for us in a whole new way, in a way that we had never seen before. And the problem of pain, the writer C.S. Lewis writes that God whispers to us in our pleasures, he speaks in our conscience, but he shouts in our pains. And I don't know about you, but I've experienced this in my life. When things are good in my life, I can sense and I can hear God whispering to me. I can hear God whisper to me in the sunrise and in the sunset. I can hear God whisper to me in the laughter of my two sons. I can hear that whisper of God in the smile of my wife. I can hear God speak to me in my conscience especially when I have a big decision that I have to make in life, especially if that decision involves my reputation, my life mission, or my integrity hangs in the balance. I can hear God speak to me. And there's sometimes that I've listened to that speaking voice, through my conscience, and there's other times that I haven't listened to it. And when times have been tough, when life has gotten hard and painful, I can hear God shouting, not at me, but to me, as a good father would, shouting to me to keep going on, encourage me to keep going, that I can get through this. God has used pivotal circumstances in my life, and I dare say in your life. Not all of them hard, but many of them hard. And many of them created by me because of my unwise decisions, my self-importance, because of my anxiety that I would carry around with me in life, because of my impatience. I've created some of these things. But he's used them all to grow me mentally and emotionally and relationally and ultimately spiritually, by growing my faith in the middle of that pivotal circumstance. And listen, I could sit here and I could tell you stories of my life, but the stories of my life honestly pale in comparison to the story from a friend of mine of whom I want to introduce you to this morning. Her name is Rachel. And if you're a regular around here, either in the room or online, you may have seen a new face up here playing the guitar this morning and wondered, who's that guy? Well, that new face is actually a friend of mine. His name is Daniel, and he's Rachel's husband. And a few years back, Daniel and Rachel found themselves in the middle of a pivotal life circumstance full of unexpected events. And so I want you to watch as Rachel sets up for us this morning her story.
My story actually starts back when I was 18. I walked away from the church after being hurt by some what I thought were very close friends. I spent almost the next 10 years running away from God and turning my back on God, thinking I could do it all on my own. And it wasn't until 2015 that I moved to another city to take a management position at Panera Bread that everything changed. Like any single busy girl, I started dating online. And I happened to meet a cute guy who would take me out to dinners a lot. And we kind of quickly moved on with our relationship. So quickly, in fact, that within 5 months of our first date, I wind up pregnant. My first thoughts were disappointment in myself, because that is not how I imagined meeting a husband and having children would go. I 100% cared so much about how my parents would have reacted to finding out the news with it being such a short timeline. So I had to wait 2 weeks, and because me and my mom are so close, I had to do a lot of lying to hide my symptoms and why I wasn't feeling well. It was such a relief to see that they were so happy and not judgmental or disappointed in me or anything. They just loved it. So I go for my 8-week appointment, just like any normal regular pregnancy would go. And with that, the doctors tell me that something doesn't look right on the ultrasound, and I would have to come back in 2 weeks to find out what was actually going on. So, my first pregnancy, I don't know what to expect, and I have to come back because something might be wrong.
So here they are, unexpected pregnancy, unexpected potential of complications in their life. And some of this obviously brought on by their choices. Some of it brought on just by the frailty of life. I mean, this is a pivotal life circumstance if I've ever seen it. And I think we can all feel that, right? You can feel this. And maybe not to the degree that they are in, but I dare say, if I grabbed a microphone and I started to walk around the room, or if I told you online, hey, start typing your story in, that many of you could tell stories of moments that caught you off guard. Stories that, you wouldn't have chosen for yourselves. Unexpected events that come into our lives. Outcomes that we didn't see coming. And these things that come into our lives, these unexpected events, they bring with them fear, they bring with them anxiety, sometimes they bring with them anger. And listen, before we go and start blaming society for how it's gotten to this place, we need to realize that this is not new. This isn't because of cell phones, this isn't because of Facebook, this isn't because we can read all of our own symptoms on WebMD. That's not why this has happened. Maybe it's heightened it, maybe it's magnified it, but it's not the ultimate cause. Pain, or the possibility of pain, has always birthed these emotions in us as humans. Which actually reminds me of an exchange in Jesus' life between him, some of his disciples, and a few of his friends, when an unexpected event touched all of their lives. Now, I've got to warn you, before we jump into this, that Jesus' response to this is probably not what you expect. It definitely was not what the people around him expected at that time. None of them expected what happened. And the end result of this might not make you actually feel good. But the outcome will hopefully encourage you that these pivotal life circumstances that you may find yourself in, that they don't have to be lost time in your life. They don't have to just end in pain in your life. They can be full of peace, and they can be igniters of purpose for you. So John tells us about this exchange in chapter 11 of his account of Jesus' life when he sets up the story, and he says this. Now, a man named Lazarus was sick. Sickness, unexpected event, pivotal life circumstance. He lived in Bethany with his sisters, Mary and Martha. And so the sisters sent word to Jesus, Lord, the one that you love, someone that you're very close to. Other versions would say, your best friend is sick. This person that you love is very sick. So here's Jesus, and just to give you some context, he's down alongside the Jordan River. If you went and read the end of John chapter 10, you would find that Jesus had just escaped arrest. People had come to arrest him, and he had escaped and gone down to the Jordan River. We don't know how long he had been there, but he's there having just escaped, and a messenger shows up with this message to tell him that something tragic is happening to people that he loves. Let's put it into a context of your life for a second. You've just gotten home from work. It was a hard day. You've just sat down and you're resting a little bit, and you get a text message from your best friend, a person that you would, consider a brother or a sister that you're very close to. Not related, but you're very, very close to. And they've been in an accident. Or there's some type of thing that has happened. There's something tragic that has happened that has immediacy to life that is going on. What would you do? Well, if you're anything like me, you'd jump up. And so John goes on and he tells us that when he heard this, Jesus said, saddle up, fellas, we've got work to do. Now, obviously, Jesus didn't say, saddle up, fellas, we've got work to do. But that's what we expect, right? That's what we expect from Jesus. In our humanity, we see God, we see Jesus as running towards every potential pain in our lives. Building what we Christians have come to call in our prayers a hedge of protection. Now, I don't know why shrubbery got pulled into this, But it's just something weird that us Christians pray, and many of us don't know why we've prayed it. We don't know why it comes up. We were maybe taught it as a child. It was that faith as a child, so we just kind of throw it out there into the universe of, hey, I want this hedge of protection. But listen, here's what we're actually saying if you think about it in these moments. We're saying, protect me from feeling any pain that may come from the situation, God. I don't want to feel any pain. God, make it all go away. Poof. Because we see our life through a lens of good and bad. This is how we see life, good and bad. And good is me feeling happy and everything being easy and everything is awesome, That's how we see life. And bad is anything that's not that. God and Jesus in this moment, who is God, views the world so very differently. Jesus sees the world through a frame of useful and useless. And to Jesus, this is a useful moment. Jesus sees a bigger picture here. He sees beyond the momentary, the immediate pain or discomfort, in the life of these people. He sees into the future. He's not bound by the time. And Jesus is interested in what is useful for us, not just what feels good to us. So what really happened when Jesus heard this, he said, this sickness will not end in death. Which everyone around probably exhaled a sigh of relief in that moment, whew, okay. But it was too soon. Because Jesus goes on and he says, no, it's for God's glory so that God's Son may be glorified through it. This happened, Jesus says, so that God's glory can come out. And his disciples probably got really wide-eyed and they probably became very hesitant in that moment because by now they know that things never are really as they seem. It might be for God's glory that this is about to happen, but it doesn't always, if ever, go as they or as we plan. And they were right. Because John writes on and he says, now Jesus loved Martha and her sister and Lazarus. So when he heard that Lazarus was sick, he stayed where he was for 2 more days. Another version would say it this way, that although Jesus loved them, still, he stayed where he was for the next 2 days. Now, this is unsettling for people who are trying to figure out God and what a relationship with God could be like. But let's be honest. Let's have a moment of honesty here. When a time of hurt or pain or sickness or need or whatever comes up in the lives of those of us who call ourselves Christians, who say that we are Christ followers, that we are Jesus followers, it is hard for us to swallow that Jesus stayed where he was. It's crazy to us that he wouldn't run to us, especially us. We're his children. We've accepted him. Why would he not just run and take care of everything for me? Because we think that God, our Heavenly Father, should stop anything bad from happening to us. And many people at this point in time in their life, when something comes up, this is when they lose their faith because they're presented with the idea that a bad thing is happening in their life, that it could have purpose, and that God not running to the rescue doesn't mean that he doesn't love us. But God, our Heavenly Father, running to our rescue every time doesn't really fit if you stop and think about it. That's not really what fathers do. That's not what earthly fathers do. Fathers coach, fathers instruct, fathers guide, but hilariously, and this has been noted online and in conversations for years, fathers allow. Fathers allow things to happen. Fathers know that pain isn't always bad. Fathers know that scars teach lessons in life, and they become the stories that are told, for growth into the next generation. And Jesus looks at this situation and he sees what ultimately will be. And God, as our Heavenly Father, looks at our own situation and knows there's some pain that's going to come from this circumstance, but there's a bigger purpose in this circumstance. This was true for Mary and Martha and Lazarus. It was true for all the people surrounding Jesus at this time when this happened. And this has been true for Rachel and for Daniel. When we last left them in the story, they were in the midst of an unexpected pregnancy with unexpected complications, a very pivotal life circumstance. And so I want you to watch as Rachel shares with us the rest of the story.
I finally get to go back to the doctor to see what exactly they were talking about. And that's when basically the entire world just came crashing down. We get an ultrasound done and the doctor comes back and gives us the diagnosis that our baby has anencephaly. For those of you who do not know what anencephaly is, it is a neural tube defect that affects the development of the skull and the brain and the spinal cord. And that's what my baby had. It really was like a movie because the doctor's like describing what it is and I'm just like, and I know she's talking, but I'm like, I don't hear anything you're saying because I still don't even know like what you're talking about. What are you talking about? So, and then it's like, this is my first pregnancy. I've never been through a pregnancy at all, so I have no idea what to expect in that sense. And now a complicated pregnancy as your first pregnancy is like, how am I supposed to even comprehend how I'm supposed to do it? So then you would get like your questions answered, but then you had like all these other ones because getting answers created more questions. So every day was full of questions and no real answers. When we saw the high-risk doctor, that's when he actually like pulled up Amos's ultrasound and then pulled up a normal baby's ultrasound and compared the two and actually showed us like, this is what it should look like and this is what it doesn't look like. But then he answered all of the doctor questions. He gave us all the facts. That's where we learned that with each pregnancy there's a 3% chance it could happen again, and that there will always be that chance, that doesn't go away. And just like what my pregnancy would look like, they told us like the complications I would have, they told us the issues I would have. Everything was, these things will happen. And then when we were saying like, but what if they don't, they were, no, but they will. He gave us our options. We could terminate now, don't worry about it. We could carry to term, or what we, he would probably pass on his own anyways. That's generally what happens with anencephalic babies. They just pass on their own at some point. Or we could go to term and he'd pass after he was born. And the only two questions I had that I knew right away what I was going to ask, but I waited until the next appointment, was would any harm come to him inside the womb if I carried? Because if he was going to be in any pain or anything like that, that's not right. I wouldn't want him to suffer. Or would anything harm me in future children or whatever? And the answer to both those questions were no. So when I asked the doctor and got those answers, and I decided to carry to term, that's when we basically lost all support from all of those doctors. So upon finding out that I was pregnant, I immediately started going back to church after almost 10 years of turning my back on church. I knew I wanted my family my children to grow up in church like I did. So that is what kind of helped keep my hope alive, was being surrounded by godly people who supported me in that way. Daniel, on the other hand, coped a very different way. I was on one side of knowing God would heal him because he's perfectly capable and willing to do so. And Daniel had already basically started mourning the loss of our son because he just accepted reality for what it was. And so he started his grieving process almost a year sooner than I did. So, like, looking back, I wish me and Daniel's viewpoints could have been meshed together, because it would have maybe been a more healthy way of coping through the entire pregnancy. So on March 30th, 2017, we welcomed Amos into this world, and immediately all of my fears became reality when I realized that God, in fact, did not heal Amos in the way that I thought he would. My heart sank all the way into my stomach, and I just felt numb. We spent 2 days in the hospital, and very early in the morning that we were supposed to go home is when Amos decided to leave us. So on our way home from the hospital that day, me and Daniel both decided together that we were not going to let the loss of our son tear us apart, and that in fact we wanted it to bring us closer together. And that decision began our healing process, which we had no idea what that looked like, what it involved, or even what to do, which made the whole next year of our lives terrible. I went through a period of time after Amos passed thinking that his passing was for no reason. Like, I couldn't have lost my son for nothing. But I wasn't seeing what God had promised would come from a terrible situation, and that he would use it for good. In not seeing that, I went in kind of a depression. So after that first year, after Amos passed, we decided to take a trip to Ohio to visit my new sister-in-law and brother-in-law. They had played a huge positive part in our lives that whole past year, and we just wanted to see them. While we were here for that trip, I felt a stirring in me that maybe God was doing something or taking us somewhere different than what we were doing currently. So I prayed about and held on to that feeling that whole year, and we planned another trip to come and visit at Christmas that same year. And during that trip, Daniel also felt that same stirring, and on our way home, we both realized that we knew we were supposed to move to Dayton. So we made this decision based on the experiences that we had while we were here, and the people that we met, and the love that surrounded us that we needed, but we didn't know that we needed. I knew that Amos's life had purpose, but I didn't know exactly what that purpose was, and because I wasn't being told or shown what that purpose was, I started believing the lies that his life in fact didn't have purpose. So that in turn made me believe that maybe my life didn't have purpose. I was always going to be known as the girl who lost her son and nothing more. It wasn't until after we moved to Ohio that I started learning little by little that Amos's life did in fact have purpose. And yes, I am the girl that lost her son, but I'm much more than that. I wouldn't have been able to realize that or come to that realization if God didn't put the people in my life to help me walk down that road of being able to find that. I couldn't have found it on my own. Our walk of losing Amos is not done yet. It's something that we will carry with us every day for the rest of our lives. And that thought used to bring me down a lot. I didn't want to remember my son and always cry. But now we get to walk and celebrate the fact that we get to carry him with us every single day. Because of losing Amos, I can connect with women who have been through similar circumstances as me in a completely different way than other people can. We get to talk about him, we get to bring him up, and we get to share our story with others. Instead of looking at it in a way of, I don't want to have to do this, we now celebrate the fact that we get to. We get to walk away with full hearts, knowing that we have continued with Amos's intended purpose, and we get to use that for whatever God has use for. I'm so glad that God reminds me every day that there is a purpose in my pain.
And as you watch that, if you're anything like me, your heart twists and it turns. You hurt for her, you hurt for them. And if you've experienced something similar to this, you probably feel this at even like a deeper level. But no matter where you are in your understanding of God, your journey to or in faith, there's something that just happens in all of us when we see someone go through something so difficult and yet come out on the other side with peace and with purpose. There's a spark inside of each of us that flickers with the hope that this could be us, that I could go through something that is just seemingly terrible in humanity, but that I could come out on the other side like better for it. And this is why James, the half-brother of Jesus, would say years after this encounter about Lazarus, he would say this. He would tell us to consider it pure joy, my brothers and sisters, whenever you face trials of many kinds. James is saying, like, basically, think about what's going on. Can you think about it in a different way? Give space for something more than what you see. And why should you do that? Well, James, who saw all of these things, who saw the end result, which you can go and read for yourself in John chapter 11, but it's bigger than the end result of what happens. He saw how many people's faith actually grew in who his brother was. James, who spent a lot of time with his brother Jesus, says to do this, to consider it pure joy whenever you face trials of many kinds, because you know that the testing of your faith produces perseverance. And deep down inside, we all know this to be true. It's just hard for us to accept, because we know that it's going to produce perseverance. James is saying that there's an outcome. Life isn't random. It's not useless unless we make it useless by our approach to the situation. Listen, if all we're looking for is good and bad in life, we might miss out on something useful for our lives. And as your faith grows and produces perseverance, he says, don't stop it. Don't stop it when the next thing comes, because we all know we're just one day away from the entire world shutting down. He says, let perseverance finish its work so that you may be mature and complete, not lacking anything. Let perseverance finish its work. James says the outcome of these tests that happen in life is perseverance. Perseverance is the persistence in doing something despite difficulty or delay. That's perseverance. And that perseverance through these times has a goal of completeness, which we all want to be complete in our lives. But honestly, when it feels like God is allowing something to happen to us, it is really easy to lose faith or to refuse faith. But when we're able to accept what he is doing in us, that he's doing something in us, we become candidates for the grace and the peace that is needed to be able to endure and the purpose that can live out through us ultimately in our lives. And many times, like in Rachel's case, what shapes our response to these pivotal circumstances is the support from the providential relationships that we have around us from people during these times. The people who help us to frame these circumstances in such a way that we can see that God is not doing something to us, but he's doing something in us and ultimately doing something through us. Through practical teaching and through private disciplines, we nurture trust in God by spending time with him and letting go of our egos. We begin to live in a place of trust in God rather than a suspicion that he's not really good. And like Rachel, seeing that God might be setting us up for a personal ministry that is just so unique to us and so needed in someone else's life. Allowing our personal pain through a pivotal circumstance to become more than just a definition of us. And so I don't know about like where you are in your faith. I don't know what has happened in your life. I don't know, I'm not aware of anything that is happening in your life right now. But I truly believe, like I said earlier, that every unexpected event in your life, it brings unimaginable opportunity. It brings great opportunity to your life. No matter how big, no matter how small, no matter whether it feels good or it looks bad, those things bring great opportunity into our life when we see them through the lens of being useful for growing our faith, trusting that God has a purpose in our pain. To close today, we're going to sing a song, but we're not just singing a song to sing a song. This isn't a musical. This song says something very important to our lives, something very important for us to remember as we wrap up today. The second verse has this line in it. It says that because the God of the mountain is the God of the valley, and there's not a place where your mercy and grace won't find me again. Meaning that no matter what, no matter when, no matter how many times that it comes up in your life, that God is there for the good and the bad and can make it all useful if we can just allow it to be so. So I want you to take this next moment and sing if you're ready to sing. If you're not, though, read these words and just let them sink into like your heart as you look at this. Maybe you're not ready to do even that. Maybe for you, the best thing to do is to sit there and to pray and to just let this song kind of, ring in your ears as you pray for the first time or the first time in a long time. But ultimately, I want you to open your heart to the purpose that God can have from past pain and could have from current or future pain in your lives. Because it might be crazy, but I believe that it's true that everything happens for a reason.